In much of this year, 2025, I woke up to an incredibly disturbing fact about myself. And it shook me to my core because I realized that I had been reacting correctly to British propaganda for close to a decade. And it was especially shocking because I've always thought of myself as incredibly, media literate. I've thought of myself like as someone who is a critical thinker. And so to realize that about myself, you can imagine how disturbing it was, especially because over the past 2 years, I've been trying to understand how only in 2023, so many people were finding out for the first time that there was even a place in the world called Palestine. And it's been going through apartheid for over 7 decades. Like, I didn't understand that, but in much of this year, I finally got it. It finally clicked. Because propaganda isn't only what you are told, it's also what's being withheld from you, and not just what's being withheld from you, but how you're being told what you're being told. And I know that sounds redundant, but I promise you it's not. Which brings me to the reason that I'm making this video, and it's that King Charles III announced yesterday that he will be stripping any titles and honors from his younger brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he is now to be known. While that is a big story, that I'm not ever going to trivialize, I want you to ask yourself, why are they doing it now? Because bear in mind, Virginia Roberts, later known as Virginia Giuffre, made the allegations against Andrew roughly 15 years ago. And the palace and the courtiers and this entire family has been vehemently denying these allegations for years now, for close to 2 decades, to the point that, they've put out official statements. They even showed camaraderie with Andrew by, driving him to church, inviting him over for Easter. Like, this man has been incredibly protected by his family because they said these allegations made by Virginia Giuffre were false, unsubstantiated, baseless, all of that. Like, they went out of their way to strip this woman of any kind of believability, to the point that ABC circa 2019 had an interview with Virginia Giuffre where she outlines the abuse she suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And that interview doesn't exist today. It was canned because the palace got wind of this interview existing. And they got in touch with ABC to tell them, hey, if you air this interview where this woman is, accusing Andrew of pedophilia, we are going to withhold access to William and Kate. And that's important because at the time that this was happening, William and Kate were seen as kind of like the face of the monarchy, the young ones, the ones that we're supposed to be rooting for and looking forward to. Like, they were the PR, the face of the monarchy. And so the interview was canned because, again, they were saying to us that this woman is lying. And Andrew even gave a BBC interview in which he tells us he cannot sweat because, this is the other thing that was done to Virginia Giuffre, is that when she was telling her story, she had to relive a lot of what happened to her by giving details, because this is what happens to these kinds of victims. They get victimized again because society demands that you prove that you were in fact victimized in this way. And she told us, how he sweated and all of that. I'm not going to get into it but Andrew went on the BBC and told us he couldn't sweat. Like, around the time that Virginia said she was being victimized by him, he had an incapability of sweating. In all seriousness, on a BBC interview. And then this family, again, continued to not only protect this man, like, we were getting articles about how even Kate and William would rather live next to Andrew as opposed to Meghan. Kate even had a statement where walking next to Meghan at some point was one of the hardest things, was in fact the hardest thing she's ever had to do in her life. And we were getting all of these articles about how all of these people would prefer Andrew over Meghan. So that's how these people have protected this man, not just, legally, but also socially and also financially, because they paid Virginia Giuffre £12 million. £12 million that was disclosed to settle out of court because they didn't want the case to go to court. Additionally, Andrew refused to cooperate with the FBI with their investigation because remember, he's now involved with Jeffrey Epstein and that syndicate and that trafficking ring and all of that. But he refused to cooperate. Right? This is what has been going on for 15 years. So why now are they suddenly stripping him of all his titles and honors? These are the questions you need to ask yourself. Because it turns out one of the things that's going on today, 31st of October, 2025, is that there's a congressional panel in the United States because they are investigating Andrew Epstein because a lot of the crimes happened there and he was American and all of that, right? And so they are unsealing some of those financial documents that he would have been involved in. And I want you to also remember in September of this year, 2025, roughly around like the week of like the 20th to the 27th. I'm not sure on the exact date. I'll try to put it here when I find it, right? We got a story about how Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, who is functionally his wife, they still live together. They're just officially divorced, but they still live together. Fergie's email was one of the documents that was released from this congressional investigation. And in this email, we find out that in 2011, 3 years after Jeffrey Epstein had been convicted of soliciting, prostitution from a minor, 3 years after his conviction, Fergie went on some interview or whatever and said, she regrets taking money from him. He's a pedophile, he's a disgusting person and all of that. Like she regrets her relationship with him. And then apparently Jeffrey Epstein then threatened Fergie and told her, hey, I could ruin your family. And so Fergie sent an email to Jeffrey privately to say, hey, babe, I'm actually sorry. You're a steadfast, generous friend of mine. I had to say that publicly because I have to salvage my reputation as a children's author and as somebody who sits, who is a patron of all these charities. So privately, she apologized to Epstein for calling him a pedophile because she was protecting herself as a children's author and also to protect her name with the charities that she was representing. A lot of these charities they work with children. So she protected herself, right? And around the time that the email was getting leaked, we were getting all of these briefings from the royal family about how, they're distancing themselves from Fergie. Like they feed us news in trickling little drops that are disconnected and siloed separately from each other so that we're not realizing this is one continuous story that is developing across many, many months. Because again, I need you to remember that this congressional investigation or panel or whatever it's called that's happening in the United States is not removed from what's happening with the British royal family. So here's what I want you to now go and ask yourself. What is getting released in America and how is it going to affect the British royal family? Like, why are they suddenly distancing themselves in this way from both Fergie and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Why are they doing this now? If this is what we know about these people have relationships with the media, and I'm going to drop a video that shows that these people have relationships with the media just now. But in the meantime, I want you to ask yourself, what don't we know? What don't we know? Because they protect each other. If they've reached a point where they are no longer protecting each other, what don't we know? I just want you to think about that. Please don't be like me and sleep and allow yourself to be propagandized by these people and wake up way too late.